Okay, so as people trickle in, I'll let them in. Hi, Sophie. I'm Newt, the Viking Union Gallery Director with ASP. Thanks for submitting, um, and thanks for joining us today. And I guess let's just go around and introduce ourselves.
I could start. My name is Greg McBride. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the advisor for the Environmental Sustainable Program. So I work with Evan and just the work that we're doing around sustainability on campus. And I'll popcorn it to Evan if you want to go next.
Evan C. Zim, ESP Director. Greg is my advisor. And this is a collaborative event with Newt, VU Gallery. So we're very excited to have you and look forward to seeing your artwork.
Hi, I'm Sophie Jane. I found out about this exhibition last night, but when I heard about it, I thought, oh, I have perfect picture, and so I submitted it. So yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we've got 10 pieces. Well, I think 13 or 12 pieces in the show total by 10 different artists, which is exciting. They're all very different. So I hope that some more folks are able to join us. But if not, that's okay. So maybe I could share my screen with the artworks that we've gotten, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about them that way. Hopefully that will work. Okay, let's see. Okay. Give it permission to do that. Okay, maybe the screen share isn't gonna work. But let's see. So Sophie, you submitted a digital photograph. Your submission is titled Moss Among the Trees. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your submission?
Yeah. So it's one of the many pictures of moss on trees that I have. And this one in particular I thought was really good because the moss wasn't it was a bit dry, and sometimes I feel like that kind of represents me, because even though it's dry, when it does get damp again, it'll become moist and thriving and be living its life. And with it being on the tree, it's kind of like showing that it's part of the tree, and the tree is part of it. And I kind of view my relationship with nature that way. Also, when I'm depressed, I imagine myself as just being a patch of moss in the forest. Yeah. The other day, I actually got to do that one time when I was crying. So that was fun. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I appreciate the depth with which you took photographs that I feel like a lot of us here in the PNW probably have similar images of. So that's cool to hear. Where was that taken? Was it local?
Well, local for me. I live in Issaquah, so that was on a tree just down the street from where I live.
Okay, cool. I'm trying to make sure my windows are all organized so I can see the artwork and everyone's faces at the same time. So I know that so far it's just us four, but it might be fun to go through some of the works that we've received. Evan or Greg, are you able to look at the exhibition, or have you reviewed it? Okay, awesome. And Sophie, were you able to see the exhibition since it's publishing?
Yes,
Okay,
I
awesome.
looked through the pieces.
Cool. Yeah, sorry my screen sharing abilities have been hindered today, but yeah, so let's see. Let's go through and we can chat about some of the pieces that are in here. So like Sophie, there's a couple of other submitters who included digital photographs. I think there's a total of 4. Oh, and one underwater photograph, which was cool. Wasn't expecting that. But I think that, let's see. Yeah, let's talk about this underwater photograph. So this is by Sydney, who is not here, but this piece is a photograph of Sydney modeling in this white dress and an umbrella underwater at what appears to be a tea party. And Sydney writes that this portrait deals with both fear and love and respect for the natural world, and it also deals with the nature of life and death, which is something that I think without the artist's interpretation, I don't think I would have gotten that from this piece, which is really always fun for me as someone who works with artwork and artists to be surprised. Is there a piece that anyone else has found surprising in the show?
I will say I was immediately drawn to the. Sorry, my kids are home, so I apologize for the bird noises in the background. The oil on canvas by Rachel Rothberg called Lux, and when I first saw it, I was like, "Wow, is that a photograph?" Like, just and that's just me being really naive in art and like how just exceptional people can be with oil on canvas and how detailed it was. And so from a just it was just such a striking picture of this of a bird and just this very vulnerable kind of position, and it was just really like, so when I had a different appreciation for it at first, and then I was like, oh, it's oil on camp, wow, like just kind of blew my mind. So I thought that one was really striking just from a visual perspective.
Yeah. So Rachel actually has a few pieces in Rachel's in the BFA this year, and they have a few pieces in our earlier show, Inside Out, which was our show with the BFA cohort. So if you're interested, you can see some more of Rachel's work there. It's sound and I believe drawings that were scanned. So the idea is that you listen to the sound that the bird that's being depicted is making. So there's this cool play with the senses that I appreciate Rachel for being able to achieve in a remote setting. I think that's really awesome. But yeah, this piece Lux is, for me, being familiar with Rachel's work, is really fitting with some of the other pieces I've seen them do. But this piece is another one that I don't think I would have fully grasped the nature of until reading the artist statement. So let's see. Yeah, Rachel writes that this painting resonates with their own experiences of loss and grief. and allowing space for those emotions to take place in others. I'm assuming that also includes viewers. And I feel like this is a piece that I could sit with for a while to ruminate on those feelings in myself, and not only very human feelings, but Rachel also mentions that this painting helps to illuminate larger patterns of bird disappearance as a global turning point for ecological conservation. And that's something that I don't think I would have instantly taken from this piece. So I appreciate that that's elaborated here.
I really like A Mother's Gift by Leah Adams. At first I was kind of confused about the hands, because at first I thought it was like an actual person, but I'm like, where's the person? But it looks like that's like a sculpture, and I like the how the inscription that goes with it talks about how you can take some flowers, but you have to think about how much you take to leave for others. And I think that's a really poetic statement to have with a bunch of flowers, because that's how it should be in how people treat the earth. And I really like it.
Yeah, I appreciate that one as well. It kind of feels like what is that phrase that I feel like outdoorsy folks say? Like, take only memories, leave only footprints. I feel like I've seen that on t-shirts, but yeah, I think that the meaning of this piece is really directly applicable in its literal sense. Yeah, I feel like now that the sun is coming out and we're starting to get into not just like late spring, but soon, hopefully we get that early summer weather. I've been able to go out to some of the beaches here in Bellingham a little bit more often, and I am always shocked by the amount of like cans and wrappers I see on our beaches here. And I'm sure that's the same everywhere else, but it just blows my mind that there is such a lack of care towards I don't know, personal responsibility, it feels like. So yeah, I feel like this piece is directly speaking to instances like that. Evan, I like that you mentioned quite a few pieces here. Let's talk about the Untitled work by Ben. I think that's also a digital photograph. This one is, let's see. Oh, weird. It's like not loading for me. But it's the image of pretty sparse branches in like a dense purple fog. That one feels very different from some of the other pieces that we've had in this collection. It feels very spooky and a little bit ominous, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate that it's being shared in the spring. I like the contrast here with this image and some of the others.
Yeah, I really like that image too. It kind of feels like it's like you can hear how like still and quiet it is through the picture. Maybe a chill fall breeze. I don't know. The colors are just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I was gonna say I really like that one too. I like the darkness of it. Like like I get the idea of, and you could maybe take this either way, is it sunrise or sunset? And I took it as like sunset and the fall, and like how part of nature and life is almost this cycle of death. And I wasn't able to get to the artist statement, so I'd be really interested to see what Ben wrote about the piece, but just how, here's this element of nature that's dying away and is in its sunset, and how that relates to the theme of seeing yourself in nature. I thought was really kind of intriguing. I'd like to know more about.
So I don't know, I just noticed this, but can someone tell me if they're having the same issue when I go to look at the exhibition and I go to click on Ben's piece, it doesn't show me Ben's piece? Is anyone else having that problem? Okay, all right, so it's not just me, good to know. Glad I caught that just now.
Yeah. For some reason, I keep getting Untitled by Finn Winded.
Yeah, me too. Okay, weird. Let me see if I can edit that, which is weird. On my end, it looks like an admin section. Everything is in its right place. So I'll work on that. I'll fix it. But let me pull up Ben's description of that piece so we can talk about it a little bit more. Let's see. Okay. Ben says, the dark colored fog distorts the silhouettes of branches in the background of the image, which I interpret as conveying a feeling of uncertainty, of not being able to see clearly something which seems so close. This feeling of uncertainty is the same feeling that I experience when thinking of the current state of the environment and the role it will continue to play in the future. Yeah, I feel like coupled with that statement, the ominous feeling that I'm getting is very representative. Let's see. Ooh, let's also talk about Denizen. Evan, you brought this one up too. So Denizen by Elizabeth Berger is another painting on canvas with a human figure. Either, now that I'm looking at it a little bit longer, they're either surrounded by foxes or partially constituted by foxes. There's some, what looks like a fox, like upper jaw on the back of the human figure's head. And I can't tell if they're one and the same or if they're separate entities. Yeah, that's not clear to me. But as I'm looking at it longer, there's also a couple of other things that are really intriguing, like the night sky feels very geometric, and in the foreground we have some of the flora taking place on top of the human figure as well. So it almost feels as though the figure is a part of the landscape, a part of the scene, rather than like a separate entity that's joining the scene. I wonder if that makes sense to anyone else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I totally cannot tell where the person begins and the fox, or where the person ends and the fox begins. And I think that's really cool. The more I look, the more types of flowers that I'm able to see. Some of them kind of blend in with the sky.
Yeah, totally. I think I'd also like to touch on Fiona's poem. Beneath the Trees. I'm so excited that we got a text submission. I wasn't sure if anyone felt like this was the right moment to showcase some of their written work, but I'm really glad that we got some. As someone who works in the VU gallery, usually what we get is two-dimensional or three-dimensional fine art. So it's really fun for me to engage in a text, especially since I haven't taken like an English class in forever. Okay, so let's see. Beneath the Trees by Fiona Martinez. I included an image of the poem, and then there's also, it's not, unfortunately not a hyperlink, but there is a link to a Google Doc with the poem as well, so that you can read the text that way. But has anyone had the chance to read it? Okay, cool. So let's see. Coupled with the poem, Fiona writes, this poem illustrates how nature feeds my creative process. I see nature as the most prominent source of inspiration for my writing. I wrote this poem in the Seaholm Hill Arboretum, where I was struck by the freeing feeling of possibility that sometimes comes from being in nature. The poem reflects my perspective of nature being something much grander than me that plays a large role in my life and creativity. I feel like that's very evident in the poem. There's, let's see. Okay, yeah, second to last stanza. Fiona describes the words, the inspiration for the words coming down like pine needles in rain, which I thought was a really lovely mental image. And then, of course, in that last stanza, there's a description of the natural setting, literally inviting Fiona to fill another page, and then derived of their very fibers, gifting me a writer's glory. I think that that stanza sets up a different mental image for me, where the words to the poem or another piece of writing are almost like disembodied, like without substance, somehow manifesting in nature. And then, quote, gifting me a writer's glory, unquote. It feels very mystical and fantastical, and almost spiritual. I feel like that's very cool. Yeah, Sophia also liked humid air is liquid life. That also just makes sense, linguistically speaking. Yeah, I'm really excited that we got a poem submission. Yeah, that's great.
There's another line that says, "In the trees, ancient and innocent." I don't know, I think that really kind of not encapsulates, but is just a beautiful image of like how nature just exists, and whatever's done to a tree or whatever, it's not a tree's fault. The tree can't really do anything except live and spread its seed. And but we as humans and other animals, we have choices. We choose to cut the tree or hunt the deer, whatever, whereas the tree doesn't choose to be cut down or to live where it lives. It just is. And I don't know, it's a very beautiful poem.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at those lines too, and the next piece of it of how the tree's only goal is really just to go up. right? That's the only motivation the tree has, is to try to get closer to, the clearing, right? Like, and so I thought that was a really nice contrast, or a nice kind of image, and the motivation of the tree. And then I liked kind of later in the poem how she's talking about how the trees and the rocks suspend like that connection to the earth. um, I really like that kind of connection between that motivation of the tree, but it's also here to just be very grounding for people.
Yeah. Yeah, something that I find, I don't know, really fascinating is that the natural world just exists, and that what we interact with is, I believe, to be like by accident. And so the fact that no matter what, I mean, as disappointing as the climate crisis feels right now, it does, the truth is that whatever humans do, whatever rational creatures do on this planet, the forces that bring life into existence will continue to do that even after I'm gone and after the people that I love are gone. And I think that that's I don't know, other than fascinating and humbling and inspiring all at once, I feel like that comes across in this poem as well. Okay, yeah, let's also talk about The Bright Side of My Grief by another Sophia, Sophia Lindstrom. Let's see. All right, okay, so this is the series of three paintings, three acrylic pieces. Sophia writes that she's exploring loneliness within the concept of grieving over loss, and using the natural setting to work through those emotions. Yeah, looking at these images just from a purely aesthetic standpoint, I find the color palette to be really not intriguing, but just pleasing. The like very complimentary, like cool and warm tones. And then I feel like in the second two images, a lot of the orange and red and warm tones, I can't really tell if they represent something in the natural world, or if they're just there like as swaths of color. It almost looks like fire, or it could be a sunset or some other natural element like leaves. And I enjoy the fact that I don't know what it is. And it also feels, I feel like those colors are traditionally associated with more not necessarily happy feelings, but positive or high energy feelings. And I appreciate that that is contrasted with what Sophia has set out to explore with the pieces. I really appreciate that as well. Yeah, I feel like I could look at these for a long time. They almost give me a similar feeling to Denizen. Similar color palette, a lot of similar stroke shapes, and a similar sense of confusion, but that's what I like about it. Not every painting is to be entirely representative.
Looking at the first piece, it's interesting because at the same time it looks like you're looking down at a person petting like a cat or a dog. It also looks like you're looking from the side at like a waterfall or a path, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a little not confusing, but interesting, just like how your brain tries to like figure out what it's looking at, and whether it's like, oh, is the person and the cat, are they like sitting on top of a blanket, or sitting on a painting themselves, or are they not the real part, and it's something like on glass that you're looking through to look at the waterfall. I don't know. I kind of like how I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I kind of feel like it's surreal in that way, that it appears that like both perspectives are the case, that we're like looking down at a figure and we're also looking across toward a nature scene. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. It just feels like both are true in this case, which is one of the great gifts of art, that we get to explore contradictions like that. Um, let's see. Are there any other pieces that we might want to focus on? I think the only two that we haven't directly discussed are The Shadow and Finn's Untitled. Let's see. So Thomas Hughes' The Shadow was taken in Texas at his grandparents' house. And he describes seeing himself as a part of the ecosystem, and also seeing an ecosystem as a part of himself, and then describes that self as the shadow or the collective unconscious, which is especially interesting to consider. I feel like that's another topic that I wouldn't have taken from the image had I not been given that set of information. I also feel like I don't quite understand how, I don't know, the thought process. Like, I can read the artist description, but I'm really curious about like the sensation of interacting with say birds, or like observing birds, and then coming to this, to have this thought that the relationship or the like silent dialogue, this thing that's occurring between you and the natural world, is representative of something collective and unseen. That must have been a very strange sensation for Thomas to have. Okay, while we're at it, let's touch on Finn's Untitled as well. This one I feel is really similar to some of the other pieces in the show. I feel like a lot of these artists are seeing themselves as one with the natural world, and depicting this disconnection between themselves as a human entity and the natural world as a separate entity, and recognizing that there can't be one without the other. I feel like that's a common thread here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sophie.
Oh, I was kind of thinking about my own piece and how um, a lot of times I live across the street from a cemetery, and there's a ton of moss there, and there's some really old graves and some that you can't even see the marker anymore because they were most likely made of wood 100 years ago. And I don't know, I really like the image of bodies just decomposing and going back to nature. But I mean, of course, nowadays it's not as pretty as just, well, I don't know if decomposing is pretty, but like it's not as easy as just turning into dirt because of like embalming and caskets and stuff. um I don't know, it's just kind of, that came to mind when we were talking.
That's great. I feel like one of the purposes of the show is to get together and talk about like how we see ourselves in relationship to the natural world, and in doing so, maybe we can reaffirm what we already know, that without the attention and care that we should be placing in our surroundings, then our health and our happiness is at risk as well. And I think you can see that becoming an issue even in embalming practices, exactly like you said. There's you're not only placed in like a metal or like a hardy wooden box at like an arbitrary depth in the ground, but then you're embalmed and you're covered in makeup and all of these other chemicals that prevent your body from decomposing the way that it normally would. There's actually I wouldn't call it a movement, but there are some more sustainable alternatives to death, and one of those being like a shroud, being covered in a shroud. I've heard of the mushroom burial, where people have attempted to bury bodies with mushroom spores, um, hoping that a colony of fungi can come to decompose the body sooner than later, which sounds very cool, but I think I've seen some study results that say that it's not, maybe not as effective as a product as we might want it to be. But there's a ton of other burial practices that I think are more sustainable than the traditional casket. And I think that we could probably look towards indigenous practices to learn about other ways that we can. I think that any indigenous practice of like agriculture or burial or land usage in general is going to be incredibly helpful looking towards the future of sustainability. I don't have an expertise on that, but I'm hoping to learn more about what our experts in the field of climate change are doing to involve Indigenous folks. And that shared goal of hopefully combating climate change so we can live a little bit longer, a little bit healthier. Does anyone else have some final thoughts on the show, or what folks have brought to the show?
So I just think it's really cool that, as I, in my lifetime and look at, my parents' generation and the generation before that, it was very much about conquering nature, right? And nature is a thing to be controlled, and how, shows like this really kind of come to the idea of that we're just part of nature and we're part of the existence, not something special that we're trying to conquer it. And I think that's a really important historical philosophical shift for humanity, right? That we're not here to show that we're better than nature and that we can control it, but that we and sustainability in general are as much a part of the systems of what's happening as, you know, the trees and the birds and, you know, climate in general. So yeah, that's my observation, and I really appreciate that about this show because it kind of highlights that idea.
Yeah, awesome. It was interesting to see that similar thread come across all of the submissions that that we got, and hopefully that comes across for other folks who are viewing the exhibition and interacting with the work. Let's see, I was wondering if Greg or Evan, if you had other ESP updates or anything going on for the remainder of the quarter that we can look forward to.
I know that the Outback is hosting, thanks Evan, and the Outback is hosting Dr. Robin Walkilmer to come to campus. I have to look up the date though. I think it's the May 24th. Let me look up the date, but yeah, she's the author of Braiding Sweet Grass, which really is a pretty important book in terms of relating Indigenous practices around land use. And you know, I know it's a really important text for folks from the farming community to relate to. So check out I'll just say check out the Outback's Instagram for updates on when that is and how to sign up, because I know you'll have to sign up for it because it'll be a Zoom meeting.
Cool. That's been on my reading list for a while. A good friend of mine recommended that to me like a year ago, and it just has not happened. Maybe when I graduate, I'll have time to read things that I choose. But awesome. I will look into that. And so we're about 15 minutes before we had scheduled to end, but I feel like we had a good little discussion. Thank you all for joining me to talk about some of the artwork that we're seeing today, and I'll be sure to fix that issue with Ben's work. I'm glad that I could get some confirmation that that existed. So I'll work on fixing that. And thank you, Sophie, for submitting and joining us. It's been great to talk to folks, other students, other people making artwork, since it's really hard to do that now. So yeah, thanks again. And yeah, like I said, I'll upload this to our YouTube along with our other artist Q&As, and then I'll add it to the exhibition for future viewing. So thanks again, everyone. And hopefully I'll see some of y'all soon.
Thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Have a good evening.